everybody. Welcome to the AAdvantage Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, AAdvantage.com.
Happy Wednesday morning and welcome to another episode of the AAdvantage Podcast. I'm Eric here with AJ in Austin, Texas, and this is episode 161.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. It's been a fun week so far.
Yeah, man, it's been great. George is in town. Janelle's in town. This is the first time that Janelle has met Jake.
Yes.
So I think it was yesterday during the Super Bowl is the first time that Janelle and Jake actually met, even though we've been on the same team for about a year now, but there's just so much slacking and Skyping and virtual communication.
A little bit of musical chairs. We had Jake down to Colombia twice to meet and work on stuff, and Janelle came down once, and then Jake came to Barcelona. Janelle, we missed her when we were in Europe this summer, so it's been good. We've had some good conversations, some really good just progress on a lot of stuff that helps to have the whole team together. I'm excited that we're going to be kind of stationary for a little while.
Yeah, man, putting down some roots, and then tonight get some barbecue with the team.
Yes.
And then tomorrow some pizza and trivia, some good team building stuff. We've got a lot of catching up to do on that front, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so we are kind of planning to be stationary for the next few months, maybe 4 or 5 months more, with kind of a home base in Austin. But I just got some travel booked last night. You got some travel booked. Have we talked? You're going down to Brazil in about 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, I leave the night of the 22nd. I get in early on the 23rd.
Okay.
So yeah, man, that was a Delta redemption, man. That award availability is kind of evaporated.
Yes. So yeah, we were trying to use the same pool of points, and I looked at the Delta stuff last night and yesterday and couldn't find anything. And you booked about 2 weeks ahead of me, so you just got in, when there were still savers.
When I booked, 30K and $5.60.
Wow. Okay, so you're flying to Sao Paulo on Delta.
Yep.
And then you're going back up north, though.
Then I'm flying into Fortaleza, and that was actually a Delta redemption as well.
Okay.
Because the paid flights were super expensive, and so I'm going to be on goal. So and then coming back.
Now, was that part of the same itinerary?
No, it was a different one because we end up changing our plans. But yeah, so get into Sao Paulo, and then the next morning head up to Fortaleza, and then going to hop in a little dune buggy and head a few hours outside the city. And hang out at a beach. I can't even say the names.
Jericoacoa,
yeah,
I think.
Man. It looks great. I am excited. I haven't done the northern beaches in a long time, man.
Yeah. Well, so this will be the first time besides Salvador in northeast Brazil since the World Cup.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's been since 2014. We did Fortaleza and Natal. So this could be cool, man. This could be kind of like a real vacation, like 5 days of really being low key on the work side.
Yeah, it's going to be really great, man. I just booked my ticket last night back from South Africa. Yeah. So as you know, I wanted to share this, but one of the ways out in terms of avoiding change fees is if the airline makes a change first, you can, effectively either cancel and refund the points.
And this is important because
your date.
United's change fees got much more expensive.
Yes, yeah. And so I dropped the ball, didn't realize that I was within the 60-day window. So now United charges $120 or $150 if you're within the 60 if you're outside of 60 days, so 61 days plus, and I got inside of that 60-day window, realized it was going to cost almost $300 to change the 2 tickets. So I just went with it, and now I'm going to Cape Town and got a really good redemption back. It's going to be interesting because normally, so the flight back, it's going against the jet stream, right? And it's almost 2 hours longer than the flight there. So it's like an 8-hour flight from Sao Paulo to Johannesburg, and it's a 10-hour flight back.
Okay.
And so I'm going to be experiencing business class on South African.
Oh, nice.
And it looks interesting. The product looks good, but not amazing. I feel like I'm in for something between United
Which kind of plane is it? 777?
It's an A330, actually.
Okay.
So it's a smaller plane. I think there's only 50 seats in business class. But the real reason I did it is, one, availability. I wanted to get back to Sao Paulo because I've got some stuff at the end of the week. And so there were no economy saver awards. So this was a situation where business class was actually cheaper on the date I wanted to travel than economy. And also the difference is with the Brazil, or I guess South America region to Africa, it's only 45,000 points in business class and it's 30 in economy. So it's only 15 per person to upgrade.
That's
a
great.
pretty good deal for an 8-hour flight. So I'm excited.
I'm curious to hear about your experience on South African, and I'm curious to hear about your experience in South Africa, man.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous, man. Cape Town, that's on my list. I need to knock that off either the end of this year or next, man. It's been too long. I've been dreaming about Cape Town, man.
Yeah. All right. Well, so let's get to some news and updates. We've got a couple of things to cover, and then we're going to wrap up today's show with some review about actually the nuts and bolts of booking tickets. So how you start your award search. And I'm pretty proud of the episodes that are in the course on this. So this is definitely worth checking out if you're getting ready to book a ticket, just in terms of figuring out which programs can book what flights. There's a lot of visual stuff that's in the slides and in the presentation. So we're going to just kind of cover some high-level tips for booking tickets at the end of the show today, and hopefully that'll be helpful.
Yeah, show notes at brothers.com/161. First thing we got here, man, you lead off with this because I haven't really looked into this, but Hilton's got some changes with their award rate.
Yeah, so it looks like they just basically did kind of a mass update to which hotels are in which category. And so they're making a few other changes that are a little bit broader. And we've got a link that we can share in the show notes that has some details if these items are important to you. But they've got some new diamond status rules. So they're doing an extension on the status. And they're also, it looks like, allowing points pooling. So potentially being able to pool points with other people. I haven't looked into it super in depth. Hilton can be a good program, but it's one of those things where the points are worth way less than airline miles. So it's the type of thing that I would only do if I were earning the points because I travel a lot and stay with Hilton. And so I'm just earning them organically that way, or I've just totally maxed out all the airline cards. So even I with 30 cards in my history haven't gotten to those. But we've got a link for an article that goes into a little bit more depth, and you can see how that might affect your travel plans and what's changed with their prices.
Yeah, man. Next thing up, Air France, and we were talking about this either last week or the week before, how they open up space later than everyone else, so actually their partners can book their award flights before their own people can, and it looks like they've just changed this. So Air France is now opening up award availability 360 days out, and for reference, before it was a little over 300, so they opened it up about 10 months out. And before the show we were kind of chatting about this and what that means, where that's going to help out people with Air France points or people that want to book through Air France, and that'll chip away at the folks that, the Delta people that, Skymiles, you could book those flights with Skymiles before they're open up for the people with Air France points, but not a huge deal, but it'll change things a little bit.
Yeah, so first of all, Air France is one of the, I think just them and Singapore are the only programs that are partners with all four transferable currencies. So if you have Citi, you have Amex, you have Chase points, or you have SPG, you can move those to Air France. So the good news is that the folks that know how the transferable currencies work, this is an advantage. Before, you would essentially, if you wanted to book 11 or 12 months out, you would have to use Delta. And Delta generally has higher prices but lower taxes than Air France. And so now, if you want to, and when I say higher prices, so higher prices in
more
points.
Miles, yeah.
And so, for example, Air France economy to Europe is $25K instead of 30 with Delta. But Delta really charges 30 to 40.
A lot of Delta flights, 30, 32.5, 37.5, 40. Yep.
So you're at an advantage here if you know how that works. And so just be aware that planning with any transferable currency, or if you have Air France points, you can now grab those seats as early as anybody can. So 360 days out.
While we're on Air France, it's the beginning of the month, or early in the month, so that means promo awards.
Yes.
And I was looking at this and I was trying to find out the highlights, and I look every time and there's just a lot of good deals. So, if you have the ability to, book on Air France, like Eric just said, if you've got, Chase points or Citi or SPG or Amex, or if you happen to have Air France points, take a look at the link in the show notes to stuff. There's the one that caught my eye that I did look at for the people in Michigan, the Detroit people. We've got flights to Europe from Detroit for 18,750 miles each way, which is a really good deal. And I think this is travel in May. So if you book it in February, you can travel anytime in May. So
catch the beginning of summer.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity. And there's just all sorts of good stuff. Filtered by regions, depending on where you want to go.
Yeah, the one thing to save anybody time is this is only going to apply to Air France flights. So it's almost exclusively flights to and from Europe. But they have it broken down by region. So if you're in the U.S., you look at the USA to Europe. If you're already in Europe, you can look at the intra-Europe flights. But yeah, if you have Europe on your travel plans anytime between April and May, now's the time to check out promo awards. And these do sell out. So that's discounted pricing for a certain amount of seats. And then after they book that many, they go back to regular award pricing. So definitely worth taking a look at that. Okay, so next up we have just a quick update on Alaska Airlines and their merger with Virgin America. And so I mentioned a little while ago that I had already had my Virgin account way back in December, and there's a bunch of news that if you had a Virgin account that was active, they would basically be putting 10,000 free miles in your account. Well, I got those 10,000 miles. They posted maybe a week ago, and Janelle was telling me that she got her 10,000 miles, but she did not have an Elevate account, and she just created an Elevate account, and that triggered the freebie 10,000 points. So anybody who has not done this yet, go create a Virgin Elevate account right away. And if you link that to your Alaska program, you should be seeing some extra miles. And there's a page, so we can link to the page where you connect them, but it's really straightforward. You're just going to put in your Alaska number. So if you already have an Alaska account, you look up that number. It should be pretty straightforward to put that in, unless they've changed it in the last week or so since I did it. It's a pretty easy process. It takes about 2 minutes, and seems like there's a pretty good chance that even if you didn't have an Elevate account earlier, you might still get those 10K points, which easily is worth $200, maybe $250 or $300, depending on how you use them.
Yeah. All right, we've got some more business class availability and availability alerts. So both Delta and American Airlines look pretty good in business class to Europe in the beginning of summer, so in June and July. And I thought that was pretty interesting because that's typically a time where it's very competitive with your points to get to Europe, especially in business class, especially at the saver level. So
right. So this is using Delta or American miles on Jet Airways.
We've got some good news for Europe travelers at the beginning of the summer. We've got some serious availability with business class on both American Airlines and Delta, using Delta points and American Airline points with a somewhat obscure partner, an Indian non-alliance partner, Jet Airways.
Okay.
So that's they got a fifth freedom from Toronto to Amsterdam. So that is a new way to get to Europe using American or Delta points. And like I said, man, availability is open. So Delta is going to be $70K, but American is going to be $57,500, and for both $30K in economy class. So it's a pretty good deal considering how expensive with miles and cash flights to Europe can be in the summer.
Yeah, I think it's potentially really useful, especially for folks that are already on the East Coast, where it's a relatively short flight to connect in Toronto. Toronto's a really nice airport. They have
I've never been there.
They have like one of those fake Centurion lounges, like a Amex lounge that you can get into with a platinum card, but it's not quite the full buffet and the drink mixologist thing. But it's a good lounge, and the whole airport's really nice. And so I think this is a great place to connect. And also, if you're doing a long haul flight across the U.S. from like LA or something like that, being able to stop in Toronto is a nice midway point where you can have, instead of a 16-hour or 15-hour flight or whatever to Europe, you can cut that in half essentially and have a short one and a nice connection onwards.
Man, I didn't know much about Jet Airways before I saw this. I knew a little bit, but I wasn't even positive which country they're from. And so I did a little quick search on them, like, okay, India, that makes sense. Yep. And then on their little profile, saw profit, 20 billion. I'm like, no, that makes sense. So they turned a profit of 20 billion rupees last year. So whatever that means, I have no idea what the exchange rate is. But so that's good stuff. And that's always cool to, because that's something that I was not aware of. I did not know that both Delta and American were partners with Jet Airways.
All right, so before we get into the core content, we've got 5 quick links to check out. We're not going to go into detail on these offers, but they're going to be in the show notes in case you're interested. So one of them is a buy American miles for 2 cents each. This is one of those quantity restrictions, so you got to buy like 100,000 miles, which is going to be over 2,000, maybe over $3,000. So only if you've got a specific thing in mind, but we got a link for that promotion, so you can take a look at that. Also have a 50,000 point bonus for the United Mileage Plus Explorer card. Previously, this was a 30,000 after 1,000 spend, and now it's a 50,000 after 3,000 spend in 90 days. So this does have the 524 applied to it. So it's one of those cards you can't get if you've had more than 4 applications in the last 2 years. But if you haven't had this card and you're eligible, this is a good one to get.
It is, yeah.
And it's one of those cards that typically stays at 30,000 for all but 2 months of the year. So this is a pretty great opportunity to grab some United miles, which, by the way, is how I booked my South African flight. And the reason it was available for the same price roughly on Singapore in terms of miles, but the taxes and fees on the business class were going to be almost $400 per person booking through Singapore, and it was $56 per person booking with United. So that's one of those scenarios where with the fuel surcharges, if you're in booking a route that's going to expose you to fuel surcharges, then you want to use a program that protects you. United's one of those programs, so good chance to pick up some United points. Next up, we have Delta offering double SkyMiles on travel to Australia. So possibly worth looking at. Those ones, I generally don't plan my bookings around those types of smaller promotions. But if you're already going, Delta is partners with Virgin Australia for connections once you get there. So there's some good opportunities potentially there. There's also a 3,500 bonus Amex points offer if you spend $250 with Hilton.
Yep.
So we got the link for that. I think that's an Amex offer.
Yeah, it's got to be a Hilton property in the United States.
Okay, so no internationals, and you can activate that rate from your Amex account, so you don't even really need to check the show notes for that one if you have a card that's been targeted for that offer. And this one seems pretty broad. We've got it on about 3 of our cards, so should be an easy win if you're going to do a more expensive Hilton stay in the U.S. And last up, just a reminder that the American Airlines Reduced Mileage Awards for February to May are now out. So those are generally discounts that you're going to see if you have one of the Citi co-branded cards or one of the Barclays co-branded cards with American. Instead of paying $12,500 for select routes, select destinations, I think almost exclusively in the U.S. There might be a few Caribbean ones, but mostly for domestic travel, you can get a pretty nice discount, as much as 7,500 points off. So worth checking out if you've got U.S. travel. Check out those reduced mileage awards. All right, so next up, I wanted to give a quick shout out to some entrepreneurs who have just launched a website. It's pretty cool, and actually a concept that you and I are familiar with because of our lead investor was actually funding a company that does a similar thing. So the company is Sherples at Sherples.com, and they offer travelers the ability to basically bring goods to somebody else that are more expensive in the country that they're going to than they are in their origin.
So they match up buyers with travelers, where if you're, especially in Latin America, South America, a lot of US-based goods like Apple products or
MacBooks, iPhones,
beauty, cosmetic products are really expensive. So they match up travelers and buyers. So if you want to buy something that's way cheaper in the US, you have essentially somebody bring it for you. I don't know if this is completely legal. I'd imagine it's not.
I think it's getting around the tax guy, I think, is essentially there's an import duty that you're not paying, but I don't think you're at much risk as a traveler participating in this. Yeah,
I don't think so. But really cool concept. Just a nice way to make it easier and give people access to better deals on things. Sneak around some super high taxes. It's like in Brazil, why freaking Apple stuff is so expensive.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a new MacBook is easily $3,500 US in Brazil. So this came from Federico, and he and Ignacio are working on the business in Miami, and they've got a partner, Gonzalo, who lives in Buenos Aires, who's working on it on the Argentine side. So I think their focus is for folks traveling to Argentina. But I went through the website, signed up as a Sherpa. I wanted to see if anybody in Brazil was looking for anything. I thought I might give this a try. So I don't know if they have any customers in Brazil, so I might not get an offer on this one. But next time I go to Argentina, I'm going to check in with these guys.
This just reminded me of a little hustle you and I did maybe 4 or 5 years ago with blackberries in Argentina.
Oh my God.
We had Facundo, one of our buddies, Facundo. We had him in Argentina, and he set up a little website and Facebook page to try to sell some blackberries, and we pretty much broke even on the first one. We had some issues with some theft some theft at the airport, which is
I forgot about that.
Man. So Federico, Ignacio, and Gonzalo. Congratulations, man. It's a really cool venture, and it's cool that they've got some traction. They've got over 1,000 customers already.
Yeah, if you're planning a trip, especially to Latin America, check it out, Sherples.com, and we'll put a link in the show notes.
It's like Sherpa and then LS, Sherples.com.
Yes, good explain there. Okay, so next up, I just wanted to share a quick reader success story. This one came in from Recon Scott. And Scott basically wanted to point out one of the benefits that's a little bit less known from the Sapphire Reserve. And we had a lot of people get signed up for that card. So Sapphire Reserve has the ability to book into Chase's luxury hotels and resorts collection. And so basically how it works is they give typically a special rate, which may or may not be less than the cheapest rate you can find for a room, but they also give you typically an upgrade to a suite, or they give you like $100 resort credit you can use for drinks or, order in room service type stuff. And often you'll get like free breakfast or some other sort of property-based benefit. And so it's just essentially a package that may actually be less expensive. And so Scott wrote in to tell us about a trip that he had already booked to Las Vegas. He was staying at the MGM, and he happened to check out the the luxury hotels and resorts collection, saw that the hotel he was staying at was a member, was able to cancel the original and rebook, saved $100 on the room, was upgraded to a really big room with a balcony and had a nice view, got a $100 resort credit, free breakfast. And so, just basically felt like he got his $300 in value from the card just by doing that. And, the card only has a $450 annual fee, and they give you a $300 credit towards travel. So definitely, if you're looking at booking hotels, just give that a quick look. Check out the LHRC collection and see if any of the places that you're planning on staying are there. And thanks a ton to Scott for sharing that success story.
And by the way, Scott, thanks for welcoming us to, I'm guessing, your home state of Texas. As he said, welcome to the Republic of
yes.
Texas.
Well, it's been great to be the Republic of Texas. Okay, so now we're going to get into some logistics, nuts and bolts on how to get started with your award search and how to actually book award tickets. We haven't covered this really in depth very much recently. For those of you who don't want to learn how all of this works, we do have a booking service, so come check us out. We'll have the link to submit a booking request in the show notes, and we've changed the pricing recently, so it's basically just 10% of whatever the cheapest paid ticket. If it costs $1,000 for a paid ticket, we charge $100 to do all the work for you. But for those of you who want to do it yourself, we are very excited to be a part of that because certainly we think this stuff is kind of fun. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
So first off, for this first lesson, we're going to cover a few important steps that you want to take. Just make sure you've got all the information for booking your ticket. So you want to check paid flights. You want to review the possible routes. So what airlines serve your destination and what stops you might have to make. Identify the programs that you have enough points in and the partner airlines that they can book on. Check award prices, so how many points are required, and do your best to estimate the taxes and fees that are going to be charged because we're going to come to the example of my trip recently, or I talked about before. It can be a huge difference depending on what the taxes and fees are. So let's get into it.
Yeah, so as far as paid flights go, there's a few tools that I like to use, and it really depends on how particular you are with your airport to airport. For example, Skyscanner is a really good one. It lets you just plug in country to country. So you can say, I'm going from the US to Spain, and it'll find the different options and it'll show me the prices. But Skyscanner, Google Flights, and Kayak are the three I like to use. Kayak I'm actually becoming less confident in because they've had some really misleading pricing lately, I've noticed, and I don't know.
Is it like the click-through thing where it says price X and then it's $20 more when you get past all the fees and stuff?
Or 200 or 2x the price more. I mean, just they've let me down recently, but typically they've been a good tool for me. And as far as these tools go, it's really nice because it gives you an idea of all the options out there, and that actually comes into the next part of finding doing your search, which is being in tune with all the possible routes as you're going through. You see,
yeah, exactly. It's sort of a kill two birds with one stone scenario where, first of all, obviously, like if you start searching paid flights and there's like a $300 round trip to Europe, buy the flight.
Yeah, exactly.
Save this 4 hours you might have spent looking for award seats and just live to fight another day with your points. But the second benefit to checking the prices, now you know what you stand to save. So let's say it comes in at $1,100 for your round trip to Europe. Now you know kind of what to compare it with, but you also will have some of the options of which airlines are flying from your home airport to your destination airport. And at least, for me, even though I know the route networks really well, it's still like sometimes like, oh God, I didn't realize we could like connect in Amsterdam and use KLM.
Oh man, there's just so many combinations. Yeah.
So that's a really good thing. And then you're sort of, you've got the possible routes and you started to have an idea of which airlines are going to serve your destination. And then the next step is really dependent on how many types of points you have.
Yeah.
If you have one or two, it's super simple. But if you have more, there's a lot of opportunity to be smart and get a much better deal.
Mm-hmm. So as far as which program you're going to go with, it comes down to how many points you have. So if you're connected with Award Wallet, hop into Award Wallet, see how many points you've got, see which types of points you have. And really, for international travel, you need at least 30,000 points. So out of all the different points that you have, if the points that you have more than 30,000, those are going to be your options. And the thing to keep in mind with transferable points is all of their transfer partners. So you can actually shapeshift those Amex points into Delta or Air France, and the same with the other different transferable currencies, and then down to the airline specific points where you know that with that particular program, you've got some action as far as redeeming a flight.
I think that's really helpful is like where you start out, because it can be overwhelming if the answer is just like, hey, go look up the chart and see like all the different airlines that could possibly be booked. It doesn't matter if you don't have enough points. So start with exactly like you said, whatever you got more than 30,000, those are going to be one ways for the most part in economy. And the next step is to just check out the partner airlines. Honestly, like the most straightforward, best way to do that is just like a Google search that's something like partners for redeeming American Airlines miles, partners for redeeming Delta miles, and it'll give you a list and you'll see who those airlines are. So that's like the really easy way if you don't have a resource. We do have a spreadsheet that's got the core information about these that's available if you have the course. So we're building out some quick reference stuff, but honestly, this is an easy Google search to just figure out your baseline options. And so think about the transferable currencies. If those are, something where you've got enough points to be able to move them to one of their partners, that's where you can kind of get into seeing what happens with the award prices.
Right.
And so this really doesn't matter. Like the main idea here, I would say, if you're just sort of starting out with this, is if you know that you've got enough points and that's the only one, all you have to do is compare with paid prices.
Yeah.
Is it worth saving $700 to not buy the ticket and use these points? If you have a couple of different options, say you've got two types of currencies that could potentially book the trip you want, then it's worth checking out the award chart. So with my trip to South Africa, there's actually really stark differences with these. So I started out looking at United and saw, wow, okay, economy is $30K, that's super reasonable, and business is only $45K. That's a wonderful payment of $15,000 for an upgrade in that situation for a 10-hour flight. When I looked at Aeroplan, the business class redemptions were at $75 for a one-way. So there's a massive difference there. And that's what you have to just know. You just have to know whether the points are going to be, it almost double. They're charging you almost twice as many points. So that's where it can really help. And so all you need to do is just find the award chart for the program that you're looking with. So in my case, I was looking at United Airlines. So I looked up their price for business and economy. And I also looked up Singapore because I've got a couple of different types of points that transfer. Yeah. And Singapore is also a Star Alliance partner of South African. So in this case, there's basically only one airline that operates flights across the Atlantic from Sao Paulo to Johannesburg. So that was like my long segment. You start with that, figure out, okay, there's only one airline.
Yeah. And if you really want to get tricked out and take things to the next level, if you've got multiple travel plans, you want to try to mix and match and say, okay, both flights, let's say you got Delta and American Airlines, and it looks pretty even. Same taxes and fees, same amount of miles. And you know that Delta miles are typically harder to use. So you use your Delta miles and you save your AA for later because you know they're going to be more valuable in the future than your Delta miles.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So the other thing I guess I would just reference you guys back to, if you did sign up for the course, we've got some visuals that kind of show you how you can set this up. But honestly, I think in general, like a pad of paper is honestly the best way to just make a few notes. Like, okay, United's going to cost $50,000, Delta's going to cost $60,000. Just kind of get that stuff written down so that you've got a reference point when you start looking to see what seats are actually available. Because remember, being able to figure out which program has the best pricing and which program technically could book the ticket if it were available is only half the battle.
Right.
So the second piece is actually figuring out whether there's flights available that you can book on the dates that work for you. So that's pretty much it. That's the starter point. Now you've got the paid ticket baseline. Yep. You've got what points you have enough of to be able to make it work. You've kind of scouted out what airlines serve your destination, and you've narrowed it down. So you've got a couple of different types of points that might be your potential options, and you've maybe got a priority of one type of points versus the other based on what you said, whether they're easier or harder to use, or whether the pricing's advantageous in terms of miles.
I mean, this all just comes down to being aware of your options.
Yep.
I mean, all this is just weighing out as many options as possible, and the more information you have on this and the more tools you know about, the more options you have, and then you just cherry pick the ones that work best for you at that given time.
Yep. All right. Good enough. So let's get to the next lecture here. So the second one is actually where to search for that award availability. So we're going to run through just the main topics here. A quick review of how award inventory works. Using your program's website, which is always the best way if the website actually searches for the flights you want. There's other ways that you can use different programs' websites. So like the example of using British Airways site to find seats that you want to book with American Miles is maybe a really classic one because British Airways has a ton of availability. It's not a great search engine in terms of how fun it is to use, but it works. And then we're going to touch really briefly on using Award Nexus and Expert Flyer, which are two paid tools, but can definitely be worth it if you've got a big trip that's important to you. It's not super expensive to buy some credits and be able to use those resources instead of clicking day by day through the British Airways calendar. And then lastly, how to complete your booking, just a quick checklist of things that you want to take care of before you confirm.
Okay, starting off with award inventory basics. Every airline is a little bit different, but more or less each airline declares how many seats that they're going to have available for people to book with miles. They come to that conclusion different ways. And so if a lot of people are using their miles, then you're going to see the availability dry up and you're not going to be able to use your miles at those saver availabilities or the really low levels. And as far as availability goes on price versus using miles, last minute tickets are typically a really nice opportunity to save a bunch on miles because the airlines often crank up the prices big time because they're assuming business traveler that can afford it, or somebody must really need this, so they can force themselves to afford it. Yeah. And often you'll find in the last minute there are some decent opportunities to use miles. And when you weigh out your actual savings, had you bought that last minute flight versus using the miles, there's a really big spread because the price of the paid flight is really inflated due to last minute nature, and the miles don't always do that. Delta's okay.
It's Econ 101 price discrimination of like the airlines know that people booking last minute don't have much choice, whether it's business or personal, and they just don't make the effort because so few in terms of total percentage of tickets. Like I'd say 90% of tickets are booked with money, and then the rest of them are booked with points. Right. And so it's not worth going to all the trouble to like hike award rates last minute, so they just leave it. Right. And so if there's empty seats on the flight, they may still be charging double the price it was 2 months out in terms of cash, but the points are going to be the same. Super good value. The other thing to be aware of with award inventory, or the seats that you can book with points, is there's a couple of scenarios where there's special availability based on a few different things. So the first one is the type of points you're using. Really simple example, Singapore Chris Flyers program, they have special availability on Singapore Airlines. So Singapore Airlines opens up probably 2 or 3 times the number of business class seats on Singapore flights to people that have Singapore points versus to the other Star Alliance. So you can book on Singapore using United, using Aeroplan, using Life Miles, using ANA. There's a bunch of different types of points you can use. But if you're looking for business class on a flight operated by Singapore Airlines, Singapore Chris Flyer members are going to have way better availability. And so just knowing that, like the classic example is if you have Amex points, you could transfer those Amex to ANA or to Aeroplan or to Singapore Airlines. And if you didn't know that way more seats are going to be available if you have Singapore
miles,
could
be the difference between booking a flight or not.
Exactly. So this is one where you want to check out. The second thing that happens with special availability is with credit cards. So sometimes if you have the co-branded card, the Mileage Plus cards, the Explorer cards are a good example where if you have a card that's connected to your frequent flyer account, whether it's the personal or the business version, you will get extra availability. And they do this also for elite members. So if you have elite status.
Yeah, so a big takeaway here is to be logged into your account when you're doing the search, because it's going to be different than if you just do the public facing, anyone can search without having logged in.
Exactly. Yep. And I mean, some websites will let you search without being logged in. So just remember that. And especially like say, you and your spouse and you're looking at it and you have elite status, but you don't have any points and you're actually going to have to book the ticket from your spouse's account. You still need to search from your spouse's account. Otherwise, you're going to be all excited. You look, oh, there's great availability. And it's because you have elite status and she couldn't book it out of her account. So that's just something to be aware of that happens. In general, when you have the credit card extra availability, it's going to be, something that as soon as you log in, you're going to see what's available. You just need to make sure you're booking tickets out of the same account.
Yeah. All right. One thing that I actually don't think is that obvious is we're in 2017, and so you'd think that these airlines and these programs would have sophisticated websites that allowed us to book things online, but that is not always the case. No. Sometimes you do have to pick up the phone and call, so that's just something to be conscious of. And a lot of this can be looking at one person's website to find award availability with another program, then you call the third guy to book the flight. So that's something to be conscious of. And we've got a nice little chart here on the board that, the majority with American Airlines, the majority of the airlines, you have to book over the phone. You can't book online.
Yeah, and I would say patience required. The one upside with this is when you do have to book by phone, you're cutting out 80% of the people that don't know that exists or aren't willing to spend the time to get it done. And so last night I tried to call AAd to book on Goal, which was actually a complete nightmare because they changed their phone number and they have this thing. So I'm like putting a pizza in the oven and I've got my phone in my pocket, and then the automated system system goes, oh, and by the way, we're going to assume you don't want to complete this call, but if you do, please press 1 now. Otherwise, this call will be disconnected. So I'm like scrambling to get. So there's moments of just really hating your life that are potentially going to happen when calling. But if you're able to verify that the seats are available using another website, which is what we're going to talk about next, then it can save you a lot of time. In other words, you won't make a call just to ask an agent, hey, do you have seats available? You already know the seats, the flight numbers, all the info, and you're just going to feed that to the agent. So in the case that you gave with American Airlines having so many that are not bookable on their website, so if you're using British Airways website to look for the American availability, and you know that you've got Cathay Pacific that's open, you can verify, okay, Cathay flight 617, and then you call American and say, I'd like to book Cathay 617. That's way easier than calling, hey, can you look for flights to Hong Kong?
Right.
That could take 2 hours. So that's a good thing to know as well.
One thing to keep in mind when you're using another program's website to check stuff out is you need not worry about the pricing. So an example is if you got American Airlines miles and you're using British Airways site to search for availability and they tell you it's going to be however many miles, you can just ignore that because that's British Airways pricing out had you had British Airways miles. So you know based on American's chart what the flight should be when you call them up on the phone.
Yep. And the one thing you're not going to know is the taxes and fees usually. And so that's an area where you just kind of find out. And that was actually what I found out. I called Singapore to see if I could book that ticket because I knew that I wanted to save my United miles if possible. And when they came back and said the pricing is $370 per person, that's something you just generally aren't going to know because what British Airways website in AJ's example says the prices and taxes and fees is also wrong because they pass on fuel surcharges in a way that American Airlines doesn't.
Right.
So just know points and cash price are not going to be accurate, but at least you don't waste your time making a phone call if there's no seats available on the flight.
Right.
So that's a big help. So to wrap it up, I wanted to mention again that Expert Flyer and AwardNexus are pretty good tools. Expert Flyer has a 5-day free trial, so you can do a lot of quick searching, and they've got availability for at least 20 or 30 airlines. So it's a pretty robust system. If you do want to get the maximum value, you probably want to pay the $10 a month to get the alerts because they will send you an email as soon as a seat opens up. So you can just monitor flights and keep an eye on those. And that's also something that we can do for you if you want to use the booking service.
Yes.
The second one is Expert Flyer. And in the course, you have a really nice video explaining to people how they can sign up and get free credits. And for people that aren't like us booking like 7 or 8 trips a year, the free credits are enough. Like 100 credits is enough to do a pretty substantial search.
A lot of queries, yeah.
And so you can get a free refill every month. But we're not going to get into too much detail, but it is possible to get Expert Flyer for free. We got a tutorial on that in the course. And if you have any trouble with it, reach out to us. But definitely a good tool to use if you want to avoid playing the merry-go-round of airline crappy websites. All right, so that's it. The last tip I have for today is to use a website called gethuman.com to find the reservation center. It's just really helpful because it tells you it tells you all the numbers that you can call. And sometimes you'll get like for example, the American Airlines, if you really want to get through, you call Sao Paulo because they are really good and it never takes long. So Get Human will tell you the average wait time, whether people are complaining. And it also sometimes tell you like press 1, then 2, then 1 to get to destination.
Shepherds you through the process.
God, I love that. After they hung up on me because I did not get my phone out in time with the pizza, then I at least knew it was 121 on AAd. But anyways, that's for another day. Thanks a ton for being with us this week. Again, show notes are at abroaders.com/161, and we'll be back next week.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Broaders, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Eric